With the latest agriculture news from across the state and nation, it's time for the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. Here's your host, Sabrina Halvorson.
Good morning, and thanks for joining us this morning again here on the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson, and once again, my new co-host, Lorrie Boyer. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming back. I appreciate it.
Of course.
So we were kind of chatting off mic and texting a little bit between us this morning and talking about the raw milk situation. Now, there was a farm in California, Raw Milk LLC is the name of the company, and some of their milk samples that they had, for retail did test as having bird flu. And so, that's become a situation I think that more and more people are talking about and needing to know about because there has been this kind of movement toward raw milk. But raw milk, as you know, Lorrie, what raw milk is milk that's not been pasteurized. Now, pasteurization is this system of removing bacteria and very potentially dangerous things from our milk. The milk is heated up for seconds. I think the max time is like 15 seconds for the process, and then rapidly cooled. And this goes through and it kills the things that are in the milk that could be very harmful to humans. Raw milk is not pasteurized, so that just doesn't happen. So however it comes straight out of the cow with whatever contaminants may be in it, that is how you're drinking it. So with this movement, a lot of people are wanting to get back to nature or do things the old-fashioned way. And so they're turning to raw milk, but without realizing the important safety aspects, I think, of pasteurization. So that kind of opens a door to a lot of different things. And now we're seeing it with bird flu that has transferred months ago from birds to dairy cattle, and then now showing up in some samples of raw milk. So that can be really harmful to humans. Lorrie, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, and as I also understand, raw milk is consumed by people with allergies and some other health issues, and they think that raw milk is the way to go with that. It's really not a new thing. I think raw milk's been out there for a while, but I think, like you said, kind of that movement towards going back to old-fashioned ways of doing things and homesteading, as they call it, the movement has gotten bigger. And you mentioned the farm in Fresno County that they found this sample. It's actually a second retail sample that they found it in. Nobody's gotten sick. Nobody's at least reported getting sick at this point. And a company, Raw Farm LLC, voluntarily recalled the products, but also, as I understand, the California Department of Food and Health also said no more. They are not allowed to sell it at all. So they are banned from selling it.
Yeah.
What I don't know is if there's any other companies that are banned from selling it. Do you happen to know that?
I don't know that, but I do know that this is not the first time that this particular company has had a problem with their raw milk. Before, and I don't remember offhand what it was before. It was not bird flu. It was something else that was in their samples as well. So it could be that because they have had a problem a couple of times, that is why they are now banned from selling the raw milk. Because that is a big step to tell a company you cannot sell this, but it's looking out for public safety.
Absolutely. And from what I understand, it is their main product, this company's main product. So definitely something I'm sure that they'll have to figure out and that will hurt them. However, it's a matter of public safety. And as we know, a lot of health officials, well, a lot of ag officials as well, all across the country are really worried about this bird flu mutating and becoming a bigger issue. And as you mentioned, we've already seen it go cross species. And even there was a case found, I believe it was in Oregon, somewhere in the Pacific Northwest, at least, that we have found it in a pig as well. So I think it's a matter of safety. I just might throw out there that if anyone is listening, it is raw milk with a best by date of December 7th, 2024. That is the concern. And another point I find interesting in this, Sabrina, this was a retail sample that was being tested in California, but also the state has started doing bulk tank testing, which is actually different from this. So
Right.
there are several ways that screenings are happening for this bird flu, which I believe is probably good.
I think so. I think that the more ways that we can screen from this, the better. There have been several cases now of humans with bird flu, but that has not come. And I want to make it really clear that that's not been from drinking milk. Humans who are getting bird flu from dairies, it comes from, they're actually dairy workers in most cases, and it comes from their contact with the cows, not from drinking the milk. And I think that that's important, to point out that our milk supply is still safe. The raw milk, I personally would never drink raw milk. I have a friend whose daughter and entire high school football team, in fact, was nearly killed. They
Oh,
all became
wow.
extremely sick after a parent, trying to do good, brought raw milk as one of the snacks for a football game, and it had been contaminated with a toxin, and the kids were just extremely sick for weeks, and that was years ago, and since then I just know personally. Now, I do think that, my choice shouldn't affect somebody else's choice. So we all, should be able to make our own health decisions in everything. If you want to have raw milk, great. Now, I did read when I was doing some research before we started chatting this morning, that some people are recommending that you boil your raw milk first. And I
Oh,
thought that's interesting because that's essentially pasteurizing it at home.
right. I had not heard that. Okay.
I don't know like what difference would that make. Of course, if you're boiling it, you can eliminate some potential natural toxins that would be in the raw milk. But again, you're basically just pasteurizing it at home. I would like to leave the pasteurization to the experts. I don't know. That's me. But there are a lot of things that raw milk can carry. Listeria for one, E. coli, salmonella, just so many things can be in that raw milk. To me, the risk isn't worth it. But, I can't make choices for other people.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of like the whole immunization argument. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I have my beliefs, I get immunized, but I also have a compromised immune system. So I know what works for me, but does that mean that we should be making those choices for everybody else? Probably not.
Exactly.
All right. Well, we need to take a quick break here. When we come back, we're going to talk about some changes in packaging for the produce industry. So this is the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. She's Lorrie Boyer, and we'll be right back. This segment is brought to you by Live Earth Products. To get to know a little more about Live Earth Products, we're talking on the phone today with Vice President Russell Taylor. Would you explain a little bit better what fulvic acid is?
Yeah, sure. So when you talk about the humates and humic acid family, you actually have a smaller group, which is the fulvic acids, and they're soluble at all pH. The medium weight molecules are the humic acids, and they're only alkaline soluble. And those are important because let's say you're doing a spray mix and you're mixing something that's somewhat acidic. When you use a humic acid product, that product by definition will gel. It will form precipitate and won't stay soluble. So they can plug emitters, and it is problematic for the applicator. Whereas fulvic acid is soluble at all pH. It's smaller, it's still permeable, and it really makes a phenomenal foliar applied product. And so for farmers, having access to that ingredient as a standalone ingredient is a benefit because it allows them to use these sprays that are more acidic and not have to worry about gelling and plugging emitters.
And from what I understand, fulvic acid is also being explored for its role in human health. And I'm just curious, how does this intersect with agricultural applications, if at all?
That's the interesting thing about fulvic acid is it's a really great chelating and complexing agent. Nutrients will attach to fulvic acid and it will aid in absorption. So fulvic acid is used in some very unrelated industries such as cosmetics and makeup. So when you look on the label and it says minerals, sometimes that's actually fulvic acid. And what they're trying to do is increase the absorption of those components through the cell membrane. Now, whether it's a plant cell or a human cell, the function is the same, and they're trying to increase absorption. And it's more of a nutritive delivery than it is anything. And that's what we're trying to change the rules for is currently there is allowances for nutritional chemicals that facilitate a nutrient delivery. And it's just not broadly accepted in plants, but we can make those claims in human cells. So same application, but different mechanisms.
To get to know more about Live Earth products, you can visit them online at liveearth.com. That is spelled LIVEARTH.com.
Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. Here's Sabrina Halvorson.
Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. We are chatting this morning. I have, of course, with me new co-host Lorrie Boyer. Welcome back.
Thank you.
So we were talking a little bit ago about raw milk and different situations like that, but then you brought up another topic this morning for us to chat about, and that is how younger generations are avoiding plastic packaging for produce. Tell me a little bit about what you know.
I think you know this, and probably a lot of the listeners do know that there is definitely more of a movement towards biodegradable packaging, especially
Mhm.
for perishable foods. And of course, we talk about waste all the time, food waste, and just the overabundance of trash in our country. And there's so many different ideas on what to do with it. As we know, a lot does go into the ocean, especially on the East Coast. There's even talks of sending it into outer space, all kinds of different things. So, this doesn't really surprise me, but I just thought with this new data out here that I saw today, I would share it with you. According to a survey done by the Packers Fresh Trends, half of younger people, or nearly not just younger people, let me take that back. Nearly half of all consumers say they avoid buying produce in plastic packaging because of environmental and sustainability reasons. And a majority of those people, I don't have the exact percentage here, but a majority of those are the younger generation of people. So they're very aware of sustainability, of biodegrading, recycling, this whole movement towards that. So I just thought half of consumers are consciously making these decisions on packaging. Isn't that
Yeah.
interesting?
It is interesting. And, I've been kind of watching trends at different conventions for produce industry, like the International Fresh Produce Industry or Fresh Produce Association convention. And they will have companies out there that provide packaging. And there has been a shift to more biodegradable items that are more sustainable. Even, when you go to the grocery store and you get your produce in one of the thin little plastic bags, my grocery store now has green bags that are biodegradable as well. So, I mean, even to that point, shifts in consumer mindset. It's fascinating.
I would venture to say that younger consumers also grew up with the notion of recycling and
Hmm.
biodegradability, where maybe you and I kind of fall into the sandwich between the younger generations and the baby boomers, where the baby boomers didn't worry about recycling. They didn't really
Right,
worry about it. So to this day, they're probably not as mindful as others are.
right, right. But then we were kind of the first, us Gen Xers, were kind of the first generation that really had, learned about it. It was in the media all the time. We learned about it at school. You had to start recycling, and that has been passed down a little bit now.
I would also add to that, just with the advent of social media, we see the pictures of food
Hmm.
waste and trash all over. And, I think about especially plastic bottles. I had done an article not too long ago about the amount of plastic bottles that goes into the ocean, and there was a visual of that. So that really sticks with me. So I think with social media, we see more visuals of what happens without recycling efforts.
Right. And I think also I think back to my childhood. I don't know if you grew up with this in Colorado, but me in California grew up with you have to like cut the plastic holders that your 6 packs of Diet Pepsi or whatever come in. I to this day cannot let one go unless it is completely cut so that we're not hurting the poor little sea turtles or baby otters or whatever it is. I still have to make sure no matter where I am in the world, I can be, in Antarctica, and I will still need to cut those darn plastic 6 pack holders.
I absolutely do that for the exact same reason.
I guess we learned our lessons, didn't we? All right. Well, so we have quite a bit coming up on the show today. We're going to kick off next with your interview segment. That'll be coming up right after this next commercial break. And I will be back later on in the show to chat a little bit more with our listeners. Thanks again for joining me, Lori. I love it every morning when you're on the show with me.
Thank you. It's a great way to start the day, friend.
All right, this is the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. She's Lori Boyer, and we will be back in just a moment.
Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. Here's Lori Boyer.
On the show today is Mike Heyman. He is the Senior Vice President, North America Division for a company called Netafim. Tell me more about what Netafim is and what the company does, Mike.
Sure. So Netafim is part of a larger company. It's 80% owned by a company called Orbia. And Orbia focuses on 3 core areas to fulfill their tagline of advancing life through around the world. So they focus in water and food security. And of course, that's where Netafim comes in. We're the precision ag business of Orbia. We're focused traditionally on drip irrigation. And then We are also focused on decarbonization and energy transition within Orbia and data and connectivity, but our role is right all around everything that's water and specifically agricultural irrigation.
And where are you based out of? Let's talk about the new tool that NetFM has released called Grow Sphere.
Just like the word grow and sphere, like the earth, if you will.
Thank you. All right. Tell me about this. What is it exactly?
Yeah, so it's actually the first of its kind operating system. And those that are somewhat familiar with irrigation know that there are two core parts of irrigation for control and automation. And in many cases, you can use a controller that sits at the field to do simple automation. So think about if you have an automatic sprinkler system at your house. It's what I'll call a dumb system in many cases. You basically take the clock and you say at 6 a.m. every other day, I want the sprinklers to turn on for 10 minutes. Now, recently, over the last decade, let's say, as we've got more IoT technology, you've been able to actually add more information to make better decision making. So instead of just being a dumb clock, what it might do is be able to access the internet and find out it's going to rain tomorrow. And so it might automatically stop your sprinklers at your home from going on. So think about something that simple at home, and now think about how complex agriculture is. So essentially what the GrowSphere operating system does is I'll call it like a turbocharged sprinkler clock, if you will. So you've got an irrigation system, a drip irrigation system in this case. We have a controller in the field that can do things as simple as turn on your irrigation for a set duration of time. But now what you can also do in addition to the control is you can monitor site-specific information. So you may have a soil moisture sensor in the field or a series of soil moisture sensors. You might also have a weather station, so you get very site-specific information. So the system will take that information, and it can take that information and send it to the cloud. And now you can analyze other things that may not be site-specific. So you might use crowdsourced weather data to find out what else is going on in the geography, or maybe even something as interesting as looking at the cost of energy at a certain time of day, and it can overlay that information with an irrigation schedule and help you to understand, I should run my irrigation between 8 p.m. and 10 p.m. because the cost of energy is lower. So now those are the kind of things that it can bring in and the level of control it can give. There's one more thing that really makes GrowSphere different. And what that is our company, NetFM, has been in business over 50 years. We have a tremendous amount of agronomic experience in just about every crop out there. So we've developed crop models, and the crop models will tell you, based on science and based on the information that we have for your local conditions, how often and the duration of an irrigation. So now what you can do is take all this information from the field, overlay it against the crop model, and essentially come up with autonomous irrigation. You can irrigate, the system comes up with the schedule for you, and it allows you to plan that schedule and monitor it and control it remotely.
How is this different than other precision agriculture software tools and programs?
I think it's different because it's taking site-specific information. It's taking information that might be, as I mentioned, crowdsourced as well, but then also relying on the agronomic expertise that NetFM has. We are the pioneers and the experts in drip irrigation. And typically what I see in drip irrigation is people will typically over irrigate. They believe that they need more water than they do, and maybe they don't see soil moisture at the top, especially in a subsurface drip irrigation system where you have drip irrigation underground. You may not see water on the soil surface, and so you may think, wow, I need to irrigate a little bit more. What this does is really help you dial in exactly how much irrigation you need, exactly what time, and I think that's the value that this system brings that others don't have.
And has it already been tested? Have you had farmers using it to see how it goes and work out those bugs and things like that?
Absolutely. We've been in the irrigation automation business for decades. This is the newest introduction of a tool, and this tool has been developed with the farmer first. So typically what we do is we spend a tremendous amount of time with on-field testing. There's been over 1,000 of these units that have been installed and under operation. And we've had well over a year, probably a year and a half or so, as we've launched the tool, working out bugs and software, making sure that we're taking information from growers around the feasibility or the user interface. I'd like to see this. It'd be nicer if it looked like that. And really taking that farmer input from the field to come up with the end use product that we have.
What is some of the feedback so far that you have gotten from some of your farmers that are currently using this?
A couple of things. I think the first thing that we've got is it's very, very intuitive. And I think today, as consumers, we are used to having an interface on our phone, on our iPhone or Android phone that's very, very simple. I'm sure you probably have things in your home that are automated, whether it be your lights, your garage door, Christmas lights, whatever it might be. I mean, it's a pretty simple interface that we're used to. So the farmers have been able to look and say the interface that we provide is a similar type of experience. So I think the user-friendly part, we've got a lot of good feedback on that. The control part and being able to adapt to unique farm situations. I mean, this can work anything from a very small farm, and it's infinitely expandable. So if you have large corporate farms with tens of thousands of acres, this can be adapted to that as well. Just last week, actually, I think a good example, I was with a farmer and we were looking at our dairy effluent system that we have installed at one of the dairies here in California. And he was telling a story about being on vacation. And the guy that was monitoring the system for the time, his field worker, called him up and said, "Hey, we got a problem. I'm trying to do this. I'm trying to do that." And he said, "Well, hold on a minute. I have my phone. Let me turn it on real quick." So he was able to, on vacation, pick up his phone, said, "All right, you ready?" "Yep, I'm ready." Hits the button. "Is the pump working?" "Yep, the pump is working." "Now check this, check that." And just in the span of 5 minutes while he was out on vacation, he was able to remotely monitor and do a diagnostic on the system.
I'm visiting with Mike Heyman, Senior Vice President, North America of NetFM. We'll take a break here and be back in just a moment. I'm Lorrie Boyer. Welcome back as I continue my visit here today with Mike Heyman, Senior Vice President, North America with NetFM. Mike, before the break, you had mentioned that the NetFM precision irrigation system can overlay with other precision ag systems. Can you tell me more about that?
So it really depends upon which tool it is. So right out of the chute, there are a tremendous amount of sensors that can be integrated with our system without having to do anything. It's just built that way so that it can be scalable and plug and play. And then if there are other systems that farmers want to utilize and many farmers are using in a specific geography, et cetera, we can do an API so that we can take that information and overlay information from their system onto ours, or the other way around, overlay information from our system over to theirs.
Do you have to be a member, or do you have to pay for this, or how does that work with your grower partners?
When you purchase the system, you get a year of monitoring and a year of analysis for free. And then after that, there's a series of different types of subscriptions that you can offer, something very, very basic up to something that is very complex and provides you with these learning models and these crop models across all of your farms. So all that information is available on our website at netfmusa.com and within the tool the first time you connect it to the cloud.
Another question I have for you is we're starting to hear more and more about AI or artificial intelligence. Is this a type of AI? Is this different? Does it work with AI? How does this also work into the new technology there?
Yeah, certainly AI is a part of it. And this really goes back to the backbone of what makes the GrowSphere operating system different from other things that are on the market today. And this goes back to that crop model. So the tool, we actually brand it the Crop Advisor. And what you'll see, in fact, there's a promotional video we have out there that I think demonstrates this pretty well. In this particular case, in the video, the farmer says, "Hey, wait a minute, we had an interruption with the irrigation because of the pump yesterday. We didn't get all the water on. What do we do?" And in the video, they say, "Don't worry. The system has already seen that. The system has already understood that that's happened, and it's changed the irrigation schedule for tomorrow." So based on anything that's happening in real time, as I mentioned earlier, like the sprinkler clock example, whether it's a rain event, whether it's a malfunction in an irrigation schedule, all this is continually analyzed and done over and over and over again in the cloud. So for sure, it's AI.
And Mike, what else would you like to add here today?
I think the only thing I would add is probably people are going to say, why would I want this or need this? And I think there's several different things that really are advantages of the gross for operating system. One in particular that we're really running into are labor challenges. And so think about the way that a lot of irrigation is done today. It's manually. There's a person that's driving out to the field and opening a valve. As I mentioned in my previous example, here's something that can be done remotely. There's certainly a labor savings. The other thing that happens as well is with the crop advisor model and making sure that you're irrigating the right amount, you can get a significant boost in yield. This will also control your fertility. So if you have fertilizer injection set up as well, you can minutely and precisely dose nutrients at any time. It's like an IV for the crop. So you can help out with your quality, with your yield, et cetera. There's also opportunity for sustainability benefits with the right water utilization. Think about soil health, fertilizer efficiency. So a lot of different advantages here beyond just the cool tech part of it. There are true cost savings and there is true yield potential improvement and quality potential improvement as well.
Once again, that was Mike Heyman, NetFM Senior Vice President, North America Division. And staying on the topic of farm irrigation and water, USDA has released the latest edition of its Irrigation and Water Management Survey. USDA Ag News reporter Rod Bain has more information from the survey's findings.
Some of the numbers from USDA's latest look at irrigation and water management within agriculture.
There were 212,714 farms, and they irrigated 53 million acres. It was down a little bit from 2018, where the survey showed that there were 231,000 farms with close to 56 million irrigated acres. So down 8% in total farms irrigating and about 5% for acres irrigated.
Julie Weber with the National Agricultural Statistics Service with results from the 2023 Irrigation and Water Management Survey, an expansion of data collected within the 2022 Census of Agriculture. Additional details and highlights from the Irrigation and Water Management Survey can be found online at www.nass.usda.gov/agcensus, all one word. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C. Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. Here's Sabrina Halvorson.
Joining us for this segment is Roland Fumasi, who's the head of Rabo Research, Food and Agribusiness North America for Rabo AgriFinance and Rabo Bank. All right, we wanted to talk a little bit about what we might be able to expect with the President-elect Trump coming into office once again. We have some idea because of how he was president the first time. We can maybe get an idea of his style, but I'm curious to see, you are the expert here, so I'm curious to get your thoughts on what we can expect as far as for the agricultural industry, things like trade and other issues that our ag industry faces.
Let's start with probably the most tangible and maybe most likely thing right now, and that is some adjustment to tariffs and then the retaliatory tariffs that are likely to follow. We started with the premise that increased trade tensions with China were probably the most likely thing. And then just in recent days, the incoming president has talked more about tariffs on Mexico and Canada. So when you take a look at the impacts of tariffs and the retaliatory tariffs, I would say they're really triple negative at best. And I'll explain what I mean to that. First, you have potential immediate inflation for products that come in for farm inputs, right? Whether that's durable goods coming from Mexico or Canada, whether that's chemical components that go into farm inputs from places like China. That's a potential negative impact on the food and ag value chain is potential inflation in farm inputs. The second thing, which is probably the most obvious, and that's a direct drag on F&A exports due to the potential retaliatory tariffs themselves. But then you have this additional indirect drag on F&A exports due to what is likely a stronger dollar, right? And we've already seen some of that. The idea being that something like tariffs is inflationary. When you have higher inflation or stickier inflation, that's going to give the Federal Reserve more incentive to keep rates higher for longer, which tends to make the dollar stronger. So you have that kind of triple sort of negative potential impact directly to the food and ag value chain. Then, of course, there's the potential impact on the U.S. consumer. For the most part, we think the U.S. consumer is going to be able to weather the inflation in the food system. They've been doing it thus far. It's more of a switching for the consumer here in North America. Continued food inflation will continue to see the consumer look for greater value in things like private label, and that starts to put more pressure on some of the more premium products. One caveat to that, and this is particularly important for California as one example, given our dependence on fresh fruit and vegetable imports from Canada and Mexico, we could see a lot of potential inflation in those fresh products coming in, especially around this talk of 25% tariffs that might start to weigh on some of that fresh produce consumption. Now, granted, fresh produce consumption is positively correlated with income. So if you could make the argument that those higher income consumers are maybe better able to withstand a little more inflation, and so maybe they won't change their habits too much. I'll stop there. I know that's a lot to unpack.
Okay. So let's look at your last point first with the inflation in the food system. And it is interesting that we will likely see the greatest type of price increases from what I'm understanding. And please always correct me if I'm wrong. It's been known to happen. But those fresh product, the fresh fruits and vegetables, like you said, that is an income consumer wise. Consumers who have the money to spend on more fresh food may be able to stand the price increasing again. Unfortunately, the lower income consumers who already have a hard time paying for those healthy fruits and vegetables, it could get more difficult for them to be able to have those in their diet, right?
I think you're absolutely right. So especially with consumers that maybe struggle a little more with getting that positive nutrition that they need, could even be under more pressure and find some of these things a little less affordable than they did in the past.
So for our farmers, looking at this a different way now, you mentioned first off the immediate inflation on the inputs and things that our farmers need for their businesses. Do you think that we're talking about a big impact? Are they really going to be feeling this in a big way, or do you think it'll be more subtle to start with?
I think likely more subtle to start with. And I think you also have to look at the point in the cycle we are in some of the big commodities like corn and soybeans, right? Those commodities have come under significant price pressure over the last 18 to 24 months. That is already starting to put some downward pressure on some of the farm input demand, particularly when you think of equipment, durable goods. Like that's usually the first thing that the farmer says, okay, I can hold off a little bit on making that investment. So there's already some of that happening due to market forces, and any increased inflation of those farm inputs it's really happening at the worst possible time if it does end up occurring like that.
On top of also, as you mentioned too, inflation that we've already seen over the last few years as well. Do you think, and also let me just point out, I realize that I'm asking you to look into a magic crystal ball for a lot of this, and that's got to be difficult for you. Completely understand. But do you think that with the inflation that we've already seen, the impact of getting the new administration into office and what he may do with tariffs, do you think that is going to have a very significant impact on increasing inflation once again?
No, I understand where you're coming from, right? We saw the major bout of inflation as a result of recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. I am not suggesting that type of spike like we saw back then in inflation, which has now come well closer to being under control. What I'm suggesting is that some of the policies that are being discussed would create a situation where you have inflation staying a bit higher for longer. So no, not as severe as we saw a few years ago when we were recovering from the COVID COVID-19 pandemic. But I will add this. We talked about tariffs and the potential inflationary pressure of tariffs. When you layer on tighter border policy, the potential for deportations, et cetera, that have been talked about, right, that is likely to have an inflationary impact as well. Right, we've already got tight labor markets, generally speaking, in the U.S. Certainly tight in food and agriculture. Some of the change in those immigration and border policies could create a situation where you even have more inflation in wage rates at the farm level. Again, that's another potential contributor to inflationary pressure.
We're talking with Roland Fumasi this morning. He is the head of Rabo Research Food and Agribusiness North America for Rabo AgriFinance and Rabo Bank. We will continue with the conversation right after this. This is the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson, and we'll be right back. This segment is brought to you by Live Earth Products. To get to know a little more about Live Earth Products, we're talking on the phone today with Vice President Russell Taylor. Would you explain a little bit better what fulvic acid is?
Yeah, sure. So when you talk about the humates and humic acid family, you actually have a smaller group, which is the fulvic acids, and they're soluble at all pH. The medium weight molecules are the humic acids, and they're only alkaline soluble. And those are important because let's say you're doing a spray mix and you're mixing something that's somewhat acidic. When you use a humic acid product, that product by definition will gel. It will form precipitate and won't stay soluble. So they can plug emitters, and it is problematic for the applicator. Whereas fulvic acid is soluble at all pH. It's smaller, it's cell permeable, and it really makes a phenomenal foliar applied product. And so for farmers, having access to that ingredient as a standalone ingredient is a benefit because it allows them to use these sprays that are more acidic and not have to worry about gelling and plugging emitters.
And from what I understand, fulvic acid is also being explored for its role in human health. And I'm just curious, how does this intersect with agricultural applications, if at all?
That's the interesting thing about fulvic acid is it's a really great chelating and complexing agent. Nutrients will attach to fulvic acid and it will aid in absorption. So fulvic acid is used in some very unrelated industries such as cosmetics and makeup. So when you look on the label and it says minerals, sometimes that's actually fulvic acid. And what they're trying to do is increase the absorption of those components through the cell membrane. Now, whether it's a plant cell or a human cell, the function is the same, and they're trying to increase absorption. And it's more of a nutritive delivery than it is anything. And that's what we're trying to change the rules for is currently there is allowances for nutritional chemicals that facilitate a nutrient delivery, and it's just not broadly accepted in plants, but we can make those claims in human cells. So same application, but different mechanisms.
To get to know more about Live Earth products, you can visit them online at liveearth.com. That is spelled LIVEARTH.com.
Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. Here's Sabrina Halvorson.
We're talking with Roland Fumasi this morning, the head of Rabo Research Food and Agribusiness North America for Rabo AgriFinance and Rabo Bank. So is there anything that farmers should be thinking about now that can help as we ease into the transition of getting the new administration and seeing those changes?
Yeah, I know farmers are already doing this, but I just want to reiterate the importance of really paying attention to how the details start to unfold. There is, right, a lot of this is crystal ball at this point, and we're just looking at using President Trump's previous track record and then also some of the things that are being talked about now. So paying attention to the details as they unfold. I think producers have even more of an incentive than they typically have of capturing some profit when you can in the coming months, coming weeks, even if it might not be the type of profit you were really looking to bank. Get it while you can, because there's a lot of uncertainty around the corner. I'll add a positive aspect to this, and just to remind everyone that, look, in his previous administration, President Trump did recognize that the trade war scenario that was going on was putting some downward pressure on F&A exports. And his administration did step up with the market facilitation program. And there were direct payments to producers based on their actual production of specific products that were most directly impacted. So I think that's one of those kind of hopeful things out there, that if there is further disruption to our ability to export and downward pressure on exports, that the administration would at least then step up, recognize that, and help bridge that gap.
Right. They did put into place some good programs for farmers. And I had a question as you were speaking that just came to mind. We do ask a lot of these questions of the president-elect Trump because he's a very bold person and he makes bold moves. But do we go through the same thing every time there's a complete shift in administrations? Anytime we go from a Democrat to a Republican or Republican to Democrat? And do we see some of the same things just with any administration change?
I think the short answer is yes. I think some people would argue that there's maybe a little more uncertainty with the Trump presidency. But then, of course, we have to ask ourselves, we know President Trump is one of his signatures is negotiation. So how much of the talk is a negotiation, part of his negotiation strategy, so that he can get some of these other countries to the table and talk about issues like whether that's illicit activity, cross-border. There's been talk about fentanyl, et cetera, and just the ability to get folks to the table. And then maybe some of this tariff implications, maybe some of that doesn't end up being as severe as maybe some of the rhetoric is right now.
And you bring up excellent points. Even last time around, there were issues brought up that did end up being just part of his negotiation process. All right. I think we covered everything, but is there anything else that you think our listeners need to know, or is there something I should have asked you and didn't?
I think it deserves mentioning that, look, I talked a lot about inflation, and we know President Trump's primary strategies to try to keep inflation under control are to remove some regulatory burden from many industries, but that would include the food and agriculture value chain. And I think from a cost of production perspective, that's a positive thing. So that's one piece of the puzzle. I think President Trump, the additional piece of that is to try to increase energy production in the U.S., which, if it actually happens, would also help keep inflation under control and also help drive down input costs across the board. So those are a couple of other positive potential outcomes to all of this that I think are important.
All right. Thank you once again for your time. I truly do appreciate it.
Thanks, Sabrina.
This is the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. On behalf of Lorrie Boyer and myself, thank you for joining us this morning.
To get more information on the topics you heard today, visit AgNet West at agnetwest.com. You can also stay connected by following us on our social media at AgNet West on Facebook, Instagram, and X. Also look for Sabrina Halvorson on Facebook, and be sure to subscribe to our podcast by searching for AgNet West on your podcast app. Thank you for listening to the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. AgNet West Radio Network, your primary choice for agriculture news.